Well, howdy folks, Stan the Human here. I want to thank y'all for coming on down and having a little set with me here tonight. So, we've had some trouble with sunset last night and tonight, getting things rolling with it. Couldn't do it at all last night. And tonight, had some setup issues. Took us a little longer to get going than we thought we would. But this is what we're going to be reading, The Knight in Rusty Armor. And I'm just going to start this thing and I'm going to start reading. And hope y'all enjoy whatever changes happen up there in the sky. Now, this book is by a man named Robert Fisher, and it's going to take us more than one night. But I'm just going to start reading. And I hope y'all enjoy it. It's one of my favorite tales, and it's not a tall one. It's right on. The Knight. Well, what happened there? Hold on, folks. We lost our. Or I lost my copy here. All right, there we go. So, The Knight in Rusty Armor by Robert Fisher. This is a light-hearted tale of a desperate knight in search of his true self. His journey reflects our own, filled with hope and despair, belief and disillusionment, laughter and tears. Anyone who has ever struggled with the meaning of life and love will discover profound wisdom and truth as this delightful fantasy unfolds. The Knight is an experience that will expand your mind, touch your heart, and nourish your soul. The first chapter sets up the story, and from there it's hard to stop reading this short story. Chapter 1. The Knight's Dilemma. Once, a long time ago, in a faraway land, there lived a knight who thought of himself as good, kind, and loving. He did all the things that good, kind, and loving knights do. He fought foes who were bad, mean, and hateful. He slew dragons and rescued fair damsels in distress. When the knight business was slow, he had the annoying habit of rescuing damsels even if they did not want to be rescued. So, although many ladies were grateful to him, just as many were furious with him. This he accepted philosophically. After all, one can't please everybody. This knight was famous for his armor. It reflected such bright rays of light that villagers would swear they had seen the sun rise in the north or set in the east when the knight rode off to battle. And he rode off to battle frequently. At the mere mention of a crusade, the knight would eagerly don his shining armor, mount his horse, and ride off in any direction. So eager was he, in fact, that sometimes he would ride off in several directions at once, which was not so easy a feat. For years, this knight strove to be the number one knight in all the kingdom. There was always another battle to be won, dragon to be slain, or damsel to be rescued. The knight had a faithful and somewhat tolerant wife, Juliet, who wrote beautiful poetry, said clever things, and had a penchant for wine. He also had a young, golden-haired son, Christopher, who he hoped would grow up to be a courageous knight. Juliet and Christopher saw little of the knight because when not fighting battles, slaying dragons, and rescuing damsels, he was occupied with trying on his armor and admiring its brilliance. As time went on, the knight became so enamored of his armor that he began wearing it to dinner and often to bed. After a time, he didn't bother to take it off at all. And gradually, his family forgot how he looked without it. Occasionally, Christopher would ask his mother what his father looked like. When this happened, Juliet would lead the boy to the fireplace and point above it to a portrait of the knight. "There's your father," she would sigh. One afternoon, while contemplating the portrait, Christopher said to his mother, "I wish I could see my father in person." "You can't have everything," snapped Juliet. She was growing impatient with having only a painting to remind her of her husband's face, and she was tired from having her sleep disturbed by the clanking of armor. When he was home and not completely preoccupied with his armor, the knight usually delivered monologues on his exploits. Juliet and Christopher were seldom able to get a word in edgewise. When they did, the knight shut it out either by closing his visor or by abruptly going to sleep. One day, Juliet confronted her husband. "I think you love your armor more than you love me." "That's not true," answered the knight. "Didn't I love you enough to rescue you from that dragon and set you up in this classy castle with wall-to-wall stones?" "What you loved," said Juliet, peering through his visor so that she could see his eyes, "was the idea of rescuing me. You don't really love me. You didn't love me then, you don't really love me now." "I do love you," insisted the knight, hugging her clumsily with his cold, stiff armor and nearly breaking her ribs. "Then take off that armor so that I can see who you really are," she demanded. "I can't take it off. I have to be ready to mount my horse and ride off in any direction," explained the knight. "If you don't take off that armor, I'm taking Christopher, getting on my horse, and riding out of your life." Well, this was a real blow to the knight, and he didn't want Juliet to leave. He loved his wife and his son and his classy castle, but he also loved his armor because it showed everyone who he was, a good, kind, and loving knight. Why didn't Juliet realize that he was any of those things? The knight was in turmoil. Finally, he came to a decision. Continuing to wear the armor wasn't worth losing Juliet and Christopher. Reluctantly, the knight reached up to remove his helmet. But it didn't budge. He pulled harder. It held fast. Dismayed, he tried lifting his visor, but alas, that was stuck too. Though he tugged on the visor again and again, nothing happened. The knight paced back and forth in great agitation. How could this have happened? Perhaps it was not so surprising to find the helmet stuck, since he had not removed it for years, but the visor was another matter. He had opened it regularly to eat and drink. Why, he had lifted it just that morning over a breakfast of scrambled eggs and suckling pig. Suddenly the knight had an idea. Without saying where he was going, he hurried to the blacksmith shop in the castle courtyard. When he arrived, the smith was shaping a horseshoe with his bare hands. "Smith," said the knight, "I have a problem." "You are a problem, sire," quipped the smith with his usual tact. The knight, who normally enjoyed bantering, glowered. "I'm in no mood for your wisecracks right now. I'm stuck in this armor," he bellowed as he stamped his steel-clad foot, accidentally bringing it down on the smith's big toe. The smith let out a howl and, momentarily forgetting the knight was his master, dealt him a smashing blow to the helmet. The knight felt only a twinge of discomfort. The helmet didn't budge. "Try again," ordered the knight, unaware that the smith obliged out of anger. "With pleasure," the smith agreed, swinging a nearby hammer with vengeance and bringing it down squarely on the knight's helmet. The blow didn't even make a dent. The knight was distraught. The smith was by far the strongest man in the kingdom. If he couldn't shuck the knight out of his armor, who could? Being a kind man, except when his big toe was crushed, the smith sensed the knight's panic and grew sympathetic. "You have a tough plight, knight, but don't give up. Come back tomorrow after I'm rested. You caught me at the end of a hard day." Dinner time that evening was difficult. Juliet became increasingly annoyed as she pushed bits of food she had mashed through the holes in the knight's visor. Partway through the meal, the knight told Juliet that the blacksmith had tried to split open the armor, but had failed. "I don't believe you, you clanking clod!" she shouted as she smashed her half-full plate of pigeon stew on his helmet. The knight felt nothing. Only when gravy began dripping down past the eye holes in his visor did he realize that he'd been hit on the head. He'd barely felt the smith's hammer that afternoon either. In fact, when he thought about it, his armor kept him from feeling much of anything. And he'd worn it for so long now that he'd forgotten how things felt without it. The knight was upset that Juliet didn't believe he was trying to get his armor off. He and the smith had tried, and they kept at it for many more days without success. Each day the knight grew more despondent and Juliet grew colder. Finally, the knight had to admit that the smith's efforts were useless. "Strongest man in the kingdom indeed. Can't even break open this steel junkyard," the knight yelled in frustration. When the knight returned home, Juliet shrieked at him, "Your son is nothing but a portrait of a father, and I'm tired of talking to a closed visor. I'm never pushing through food through those holes with that wretched thing again. I've mashed my very last mutton chop." "It's not my fault that I got stuck in this armor. I had to wear it so that I would always be ready for battle. How else could I get nice castles and horses for you and Christopher?" "You didn't do this for us," argued Juliet. "You did it for yourself." The knight was sick at heart that his wife didn't seem to love him anymore. He also feared that if he didn't get this armor off soon, Juliet and Christopher would really leave, and he had to get the armor off, but he didn't know how to do it. The knight, dismissed one idea after another as being unlikely to work. Some of the plans were just downright dangerous. He knew that any knight who would even think of melting his armor off with a castle torch, freezing it off by jumping into an icy moat, or blasting it off with a cannon, was badly in need of help. Unable to find aid in his own kingdom, the knight decided to search in other lands. Somewhere, there must be someone who can help me get this armor off, he thought. Of course, he would miss Juliet, Christopher, and his classy castle. He also feared that in his absence, Juliet might find love with another knight, one willing to remove his armor at bedtime and to be more of a father to Christopher. Nevertheless, the knight had to go, so early one morning, he got on his horse and he rode away. He didn't dare look back for fear he might change his mind. On his way out of the province, the knight stopped to say goodbye to the king, who had been very good to him. The king lived in a grand castle atop a hill in the high-rent district. As the knight rode across the drawbridge and into the courtyard, he saw the court jester sitting cross-legged, playing a reed flute. The jester was called Gladbag because over his shoulder he carried a beautiful rainbow-colored bag filled with all sorts of things that made people laugh or smile. There were strange cards that he used to tell people's fortunes, brightly colored beads that he had made appear and disappear, and funny little puppets that he used to amusingly insult his audiences with. "Hi, Gladbag," said the knight. "I came to say farewell to the king." The jester looked up. "The king is up and gone away. To you there's nothing he can say." "Where has he gone?" asked the knight. "He's taken off a new crusade. If you wait for him, you'll be delayed." The knight was disappointed that he had missed the king and perturbed that he couldn't join him on the crusade. "Oh," he sighed, "I could starve to death in this armor by the time the king returns. I might never see him again." The knight felt very much like slumping in his saddle, but of course his armor wouldn't let him. "Well, aren't you a silly sight? All your might
couldn't solve your plight.
I'm in no mood for your insulting rhymes, barked the knight, stiffening in his armor. Can't you take someone's problem seriously for once? In a clear, lyrical voice, Gladbag sang,
Problems never set me a-rockin', their opportunities a-knockin'.
You'd sing a different tune if you were stuck in here like me, growled the knight. Gladbag retorted,
We're all stuck in armor of a kind. Yours is merely easier to find.
I don't have time to stay and listen to your nonsense. I have to find a way to get out of this armor. With that, the knight kneed his mount forward to leave, but Gladbag called after him,
There is one who can help you, knight, to bring the real you into sight.
The knight pulled his horse to a stop, and excitedly he turned back to Gladbag. You know someone who can get me out of this armor? Who is it?
Merlin the magician, you must see. Then you'll discover how to be free.
Merlin? The only Merlin I've ever heard of is the great and wise teacher of King Arthur.
Yes, that's his claim to fame. This Merlin I know is one and the same.
But that can't be, exclaimed the knight. Merlin and Arthur lived years ago. Long ago. Gladbag replied,
It's true, yet he's alive and well. In yonder woods the sage doth dwell.
But those woods are so big, said the knight. How will I find him in there? Gladbag smiled.
One never knows, be it days, weeks, or years. When the pupil is ready, the teacher appears.
I can't wait for Merlin to show up. I'm going to look for him, said the knight. He reached out and shook Gladbag's hand in gratitude, nearly crushing the jester's fingers with his gauntlet. Gladbag yelped. The knight quickly released the jester's hand. Sorry. Gladbag rubbed his bruised fingers.
When the armor's gone from you, you'll feel the pain of others too.
I'm off, said the knight. He wheeled his horse around, and with new hope in his heart, galloped away to find Merlin. Tomorrow, Chapter 2, In Merlin's Woods. I'm Stan the Human. I love you, and I hope you've enjoyed this sunset ceremony. We'll continue with The Knight in Rusty Armor by Robert Fisher tomorrow night. Stan the Human, I love you, and I am out of here.